Welcome to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. Join me each week as I interview experts who will share the science of sugar, sugar addiction, and different approaches to recovery. We hope to empower you with the information and inspiration, insights, and strategies you need to break up with sugar and fall in love with healthy whole foods so you can prevent and reverse chronic disease, lose weight, boost your mood and energy. Feel free to go to my website for details on my coaching programs and to access free resources, kicksugarcoach.com. Welcome, everybody, to the Kick Sugar Coach podcast. I have with me today Sarah Seidelmann. And technically, I should put the word doctor in front of it because she's an MD. She's a fourth generation MD who in 2010 decided to reinvent her career, her life, and is now she's a shamanic mentor. She's the author of 6 different books, all of which you can find on Amazon, but 2 of which you can find on Audible if you like to listen. Her latest book is a novel called Where the Deer Dream. Let's see what else to say. She was a 4th generation physician living a hectic, nature-starved life that is now night and day. But in that transition, there's also this story of her breaking up with sugar. And so today we're going to explore that part of her journey and what role that played in discovering a whole new life for herself, which is radiantly obvious. If you go on her website, you see her face, you can tell, right, that she's clearly on her path. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much, Florence. Super happy to be here.
So tell us a bit about your sugar journey. How did you first discover that this was a thing for you?
Yeah, I think I grew up with probably a dysfunctional relationship to food in general. But somehow didn't get into too much trouble until I probably hit midlife. I was a big exerciser. I love to work out. I'm super athletic, that kind of thing. And so I sort of was able to get away with all the things that I did. But I was always on some diet or another, always trying to lose this, 5 pounds, 10 pounds, Weight Watchers, whatever. It was always something, with my friends and I. And I grew up in a house where that was not also something that was going on all the time. There was always dieting happening. And it wasn't until about 2018, I think it was that fall, or 2017, fall of 2017, I began to observe myself. I had done enough personal transformation work. I started noticing, wow, Sarah, you come home from work and around like 3:30, 4 o'clock, I see you eating a bowl of muesli. It wasn't like I was eating Twinkies, although, that was a possibility too, but I would eat this muesli. I wasn't hungry. I was just sort of like jonesing for something. And that year I said to myself, I want to get into integrity with myself. I'm sick of saying I'm not going to eat X and then watching myself go and do that. And so I hired a coach, which was sort of the beginning of just committing some funds and some time to what is the issue? Let's get to the bottom of this. I know joining Weight Watchers is not the answer for me. It might be for many people, but it wasn't for me. And in that, the woman who coached me said to me, hey, have you ever thought of going off flour and sugar for a period of time to see what would happen? And I was just inside, I was like, how dare you suggest such an evil, I knew that was coming. And I was like, that's impossible. I've tried that before, that doesn't work, or that's not sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. But not too long after that, I got an invite from Brightline Eating somehow in my email. I don't remember how I even got on their list, but it was like, would you like to do this thing? It's no flour, no sugar. And I was like, okay, I will try your evil to see what happens, And so this coach had also suggested that I really notice what happened when I stopped eating flour and sugar. What were the symptoms, what were my symptoms before? And, I was like, and what were they after? And it was interesting. I watched how my energy got better. I didn't feel as tired. I didn't have a lot of weight to lose. I think I had 16 pounds or something I lost when I did this, but it was more this integrity thing with me. I mean, yes, I wanted to lose weight. That sounded great, but it was more sick of just kind of not being able to do the things I said I was going to do. So I did that, and it was seemed so easy. I mean, when I say easy, with a lot of support and education through this program, Brightline Eating, I was able to do it. And then not too soon after, of course, I began to do what is called in the in Bright Line Eating community, it's called research, where you sort of want to try to eat like a normal person again and get away with whatever. So soon I was like, oh, I'm at a wedding. So, or, oh, I'm at my dear friend's house and they made this wonderful cake. That was one of the tough parts for me, was the social stuff. Like when somebody was eating, I would get sort of codependent, like, oh, I don't want anybody to think it's not okay to eat this cake or whatever it was. So I'll just eat it and go along with what everybody else is doing. It was really interesting. And anyway, so since that time, I would say I went on this, we were talking before we jumped on about a hero's journey. And during a hero's journey, first this is perfect example. Like first the hero gets the call, like to go to no sugar, in my case, no flour. And then the first thing the hero does is they refuse the call. They're like, oh, hell no, I'm not doing that. That's way too hard. You got the wrong girl. It's not me. And then finally the hero says, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it. And so the helpers start to appear, and Bright Line Eating showed up in my life. And that I would consider one of the helpers, and also got into a mastermind and other things with other people. And it was awesome. And then I would say the road of trials really started, which is this part in the movie, in every movie you've ever seen, where the hero goes through all these difficult challenges. And she finds her way through eventually, and then she discovers a treasure, which she can, the hero can then share that with other people. And I wouldn't say I'm out there like proselytizing, like, you should get off flour and sugar. But I do know it's just changed my life, and it has not been an easy path. It has not been a straightforward path, and I've had lots of support. And in fact, it's, just like recovery from alcohol or other addictive drugs or substances, relapse is part of that journey for many of us. Not for everybody, but it definitely has been a part of my journey. And recently my dad died, and kind of unexpectedly, and there were a lot of things happening at the same time, and there was a lot going on. And during that period, I had a relapse, and then I was able to gather the support wagons around myself and get back to where I am now, which feels so good again. But I just want to share that, yeah, that journey it's just, I don't know. Some people I know have met, they just decide, they get all the data, they get the information, and they just say, that's it. I am done eating sugar. I won't poison myself. Because we realize, for many of us, we realize just a little bit is never enough. And yeah. And also with that journey came alcohol being eliminated. With alcohol, again, it wasn't like it was an integrity thing. I just noticed as I had gotten older, again, when I was younger, I got away with all kinds of things. Used to party pretty hard and go to work the next day and do all kinds of things. But I realized that doing the work that I do now, doing spiritual work, one glass of wine, I feel it. The next day I feel it. And I felt like my work wasn't as good. And that bothered me. And so again, that was sort of a process of slowly eliminating it. And again, occasional social moments of I think that was the hardest thing for me. I think it's different for everybody, but for me, in those social settings where you would go and, with the same group of people that you always had wine with, or, with women, there's so many notorious events, book club or whatever it is. And I would feel compelled at times to have a glass of wine or whatever it was. And now I feel like I'm in that place where I can go to any event and I'm just I really do not care. I'm just, here I am. And that feels so great to get to that spot.
Ah, totally. So how long was this journey of fits and starts and breakdowns and breakthroughs and relapses and just research? How long did that unfold for you?
Literally, so it's been roughly 5 years. And I don't want to tell anybody that. I remember when I started on my shamanic path, I remember some people saying you may not even get any of this for 10 years. And I remember thinking, I heard a few people whisper that, and I remember thinking, you don't even want to start if it's going to be that long. There's a big part of ourselves that sometimes is oh, I'm never doing that. But it's been such an amazing growth process, and I've learned so much about myself and my patterns in that process. Mm-hmm. And I think what I've really mostly learned is that you need other people. I don't know, maybe other people have done it on their own, but for me, I needed that connection and community and understanding I could not have gotten where I am without, the books I've read, the communities I've been a part of. I have a sponsor who has been with me since 2018. I cannot tell you how much I've learned from her. I mean, things about a lot of the, and her truisms like ring out in my head all the time when I like want to control people, or I'm like, why are they doing that? I'll just hear Judy go, Sarah, people are going to do what people do. It's like, and it's just so simple and so profound. But I'm like, God, that's right. I forget, like, I don't get to play God. I don't get to like control the world. And yeah, so it's that longing to become in full integrity with myself has led to so much like learning about how to manage life and how to be with people, which is of course why I was eating all the sugar or drinking all the wine and all that. And more recently in our town in Minnesota, we had these new beverages got developed that are like THC beverages. So they have like whatever the active ingredient that's in marijuana or pot that are what's in them. And of course, this spring I was just like, I think I need to have one of those. And there's this watching myself decide that, oh, I'm going to do this. And I think it's just that it's that personality or that type of person that I am that wants to escape reality or wants to run away from pain or difficulty or discomfort. But at least now I have that awareness. And I have a funny story from the experience. Anyway.
Well, go there. Tell us what happened.
So we were having dinner, this friend and I, and we were waiting for somebody. And the person took a really long time. So empty stomach, one can of this stuff, having no idea like what it's going to do to me. And when I drink the entire can, this wonderful friend who's sitting in front of me is talking and she's telling this story. And I can tell it's like a really important story to her and it's very soulful, but I honestly can't understand what she's talking about because my brain has become addled with THC. And really, I think that's it's just a metaphor. I mean, that kind of broke my heart a little bit. It's like, oh my God, like this little innocent, hey, I think I'll just try this thing that might make me relax or whatever. And that makes me think about, yeah, whenever I was in the sugar, in the food, kind of escaping reality by overeating in the past, over drinking, but I mostly relate to overeating. Usually it would isolate me. It's the thing where like everybody would leave the house for whatever reason, like everybody's off doing something, the kids are gone, and I just open the cupboard and I'm like, oh, look, there's some chocolate chips in there. There's some, I won't even mention foods because sometimes that can be a trigger for people, but there's something in there. And then just not planned, not hungry, no reason to be eating, but I'm just eating. But it's kind of in this secret way, right? Nobody's there to witness what I'm doing. So I can pretend that I am one way. So there's that duplicitousness too, like, oh yeah, I ate clean and I'm so virtuous. And then while you guys all walk out the door, I'm doing this other thing. And so I feel like coming into integrity with myself and eating only the things that I say I'm going to eat. And in terms of bright line eating, it's measured quantities and you don't snack and all this there's a lot of different things that go with it, which sounds really restrictive, but I've found is like, it really has allowed me so much freedom. And I feel like I can show up as in a better way for everyone, including myself, which is such a blessing. And I feel much more confident. I feel, yeah, I trust myself. I guess that's what it is. It has to do with that inner trust. And when you trust yourself, you can navigate a lot of things, not just, your food, but your career, your creative process. I mean, whatever it is, it's like, you've got your own back. You're not doing something else behind your own back, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that being out of alignment. There's a part of you that really wants this, and you're engaging in behaviors that make you just don't end your day in peace. You just go, I'm out of alignment. This is, and at the worst, you end your day in shame, guilt, and regret. But at the very least, you don't end your day at peace because that's not in alignment. And it's so frustrating as we and some of us, like you've said, learn up the science, learn some new recipes, understand, oh, the 301 plan, got it. 3 meals, no snacks, 1 day at a time, got it. All whole foods, simple, good, got it. And 5.5 years later, they've not had a single break. And you think, how did you do that? Right. And then the most of us are not that. The rest of us are like on again, off again. And we're like, oh, and then we just get the junk food out, the processed stuff, the sugar, the flour, the sweeteners, the alcohol. And then, we start overeating peanuts or almonds or cashews or something. And then the cheese is kind of upticking. And we're thinking, am I going to just play whack-a-mole for the rest of my life? And then it's such a relief to have someone like you come on the show and go, look, like it was a 5-year journey. And 3 months ago, I took a little visit to the ditch, right? I did a little extra research there and really happy to be back in the safe zone, back home with my food where it's 301, which comes out of the 12-step programs, right? It's been like passed down since the 50s. It's like they worked it all out for us. We know how effective it can be, but it also does look impossible. And for some of us, it's mostly possible. And sometimes we just need to go do a little research and then come back. And that having grace with that journey is so helpful, because it can be so discouraging when we relapse and we think everyone else is perfect and they're getting it perfect. But I remember one time, speaking of BLE, that Susan had done a survey, and I think she's done multiple surveys. How are you guys doing out there? Like, how many of you are actually bright? And she said 10%. 10%.
Wow.
Yeah. I recall this was a few years ago, but like 10% will say, yep, fully bright, right? The rest are like somewhere on the continuum.
Struggling.
Yep.
Yeah, I feel like the one thing that is curative, and this is only that I know from my sponsor, is just like love and acceptance, love and acceptance. And when I have somebody that I sponsor, and it's just like, that's what I try to just say, like, it takes what it takes. And if you're just willing to keep coming back, like, it is possible if we just don't let go of the desire to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And that love and compassion, because we're so hard on ourselves, and it can feel like, you just want to throw in the towel and you just want to give up. And all those other parts of ourselves kind of take the wheel for a while. And I found, I was also part of my hero's journey. I was part of a 12-step group for food. Oh. And I found that really helpful. But one thing that I noticed is I started telling people about bright line eating, because I felt like the one thing that the groups that I was part of, there wasn't enough direction and education around food and nutrition and how to do it. Like, there was not. And so I saw a lot of people come in and just not get where they wanted to go and really be extremely confused. And I think that's why I love having something that has a loving base, but it has an instructive path. Like, this is the way, and that's really worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And the community is like, wow, there's so much love in that community. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's such a relief to be with people who get it. And they can be loving and kind and, teach us how to be that for ourselves until we can do that for ourselves. Been there, done that, been in and out of the ditch hundreds of times. And the truth is, it's closing the gap. It's closing the gap to where you want to go. It looks like you're getting farther away, you're drifting farther out to sea, but you're actually getting closer to that moment when you really get it. Yeah, I can't do that. Those exceptions, those don't work for me.
Yeah, like you get it down to your bones. Like, I'm never going back. It's not worth it. It is not worth it.
Yes, totally. And do you weigh and measure all your meals now still?
I do.
Everything's,
If I go out, I don't bring a scale to the restaurant. I know some people do that. I don't do that. But I don't go out a lot. So I feel like that social bit is that, it's so great. Like, I remember going to this bright line eating family reunion. It was like a couple thousand people. I don't know how many people. It seemed like a lot of people. And we all were like weighing and measuring our food. They had it all set up. And I thought, this is so fun, because I think that's still the hardest thing for me, is like, going to somebody's house and realizing, but I figured that out. Like, usually I eat about 5 or 10 ounces of vegetables before I go out to eat, because I know I'm no way going to get that when I need like I eat 14 ounces of vegetables for dinner. So it's like, yeah, it's unlikely I'm going to go to the family potluck and find that there sometimes, or I bring my own salad, or I, do something else.
Mhm.
Um, but it's that feeling isolated, which is that's the worst. I felt it last night. I was at a gathering and everybody was drinking, and then everybody's like, a couple of us were starting to leave, and then somebody said, if you want to stay for another glass of wine, and a couple people decided to stay, and as I closed the door, I could hear them all laughing and like going off to drink another glass of wine, and I thought, I kind of for a moment, felt that old pang of like, oh, that would have been me, 5 years ago for sure. But it also would have been me waking up, not feeling great about my decision, and then realizing, oh gosh, I don't feel like my work is as good. I don't feel as clear-headed. And that's not the me that I want to be anymore for me.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And you have to do it long enough to realize it, that little sort of artificial temporary, I feel really good. I feel a little good than I should, nicer than I should in this moment, right? That there's been an induced state of pleasure, means that, what goes up must come down. You just pay the price. You just pay it. And you're like, at a certain point, it's just not worth the price. Yeah. Not paying that.
Yeah, and you gain more, one of my mentors, Martha Beck, talks about, when we make one of these big shifts, whether it's, we graduate and start a new, much more ambitious job, or whatever or we drop sugar. For a while, it's kind of like she calls it the empty elevator syndrome. You're kind of going in this elevator going up, not like you're so much better than everybody else, but the elevator's going up and it tends to empty out. Like sometimes old friendships can die. Sometimes you lose people, but when you get up to that next level and the doors open, there's a whole new pile of people to meet. And now I have tons of friends that I can go out with and hike with, or we go out to dinner and we don't drink. We do experiences together that have nothing to do with alcohol. We go thrift shopping, we go to art openings, we go watch the sunrise and drink coffee. And there's a whole world waiting for you. And it just takes time, and your willingness to be open to it. That's it. The willingness. I think if you have a willingness, you're going to get there. It's just going to take a little bit.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter how many times you fall down. I mean, it's totally normal. We're all doing it. No matter how many people I've interviewed that have been successful on my podcast or on my summits, or, even the people that might be around you in your life think, well, they're all getting it, but I'm not. You don't know. You don't know how many times we fell and thought that exact thought before we finally slowly something just awakens, or we just get enough time away from the sugar, flour, sweeteners, and alcohol that the body, I felt like there was a certain point where it was like a tipping point for me where my body became my ally. It's like, oh, this is better. Okay, I was wrong. I like this better. You were right. I'm going to stop bugging you for I just have some cake, and start feeling like I'm feeling so deprived, because when you go back to that, I'm now deprived of what I've experienced in my body. And I know this is better, and it becomes our ally, even though we can still, go back and do research, but
right.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have to have enough time for the body to know for itself, for sure, that life on the other side of sugar is so much better. In terms of learning to deal with, I remember my first year of being sugar flour free. I felt like a skinned cat. Like, it's no better way I could describe it. Like, I just felt like so raw all the time. Did you have that experience, and how did you learn to deal with that?
Yeah, there were just a lot of strong feelings came up, like all the feelings that I wasn't feeling because I was eating through them. So, and in fact, that recently came, just I've had a lot of feelings with everything that's gone on with me this spring. And I just learned this. I think feelings are it's like, everybody knows you're supposed to feel your feelings and grieve your grief and all that kind of stuff. But one of the things I was encouraged to do recently, and I love this, it was just a really simple technique where you just, you sense what you're feeling. So like lately for me, it's been grief, so like I'm feeling sad. So then what you do is you say to yourself, Sarah, in the second person, and this is kind of similar to something Susan Pierce Thompson shared the other day, but it was really helpful for me. And you say, Sarah, I notice you're feeling sad and you're really missing your dad. Or Sarah, I noticed that you're feeling sad and you wish that certain things hadn't happened the way they did when your dad was dying. And then the third step is you take a moment. You don't do this in like 10 seconds, but in the third step is then you say a prayer for all the people that are feeling sad and missing someone and wishing things didn't go the way they did, in some ways. And I really like that. And I've been just kind of repeating that as I'm feeling strong emotions that still keep coming, about that, because it just allows you to acknowledge the feeling and then also realize that, I guess it's like step back a little bit from it, so you can kind of bear witness to it. And that's when I guess I'm in my essential self, instead of like, I'm not in this grief stricken, like, little child who's maybe going to grab the whatever it is to try to soothe herself. And so that's been really helpful for me. Writing has been really helpful. Yeah. And then doing parts work therapy. I think that's probably been bar none the best, to start identifying who's who in here. Like, what do we got going on in here? The part that's wanting to indulge and soothe me, and then the little child who's just like scared to death of what's going on, and learning to just soothe them, talk to them, be aware of them, acknowledge them, and then take care of myself and do what I need to do from my essential self, or my capital S self.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yep. Got it. Got it. And I like that whole process, actually. I think I've heard it years ago, and it's tickling the back of my head, that whole idea of naming your feeling. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling grief. I'm not feeling great about some of the things that transpired as your dad was passing, and to kind of own that and acknowledge it, and then to say a prayer for people who might be going through that as well, because all of a sudden you're not alone. Even if you don't know them, it's like there's a world, there's an ocean of people out there that are right now in the same boat. And even though we don't know each other, and even though we may never talk, I know that they're there, and so it's saying a prayer for them. It's like you're bringing that kindness, that compassion, that energy to the problem for all the people that are in that space. So you don't feel so alone with it, I imagine.
Yeah, and you're kind of getting out of that problem, like in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, how they talk about how the addict is always self-obsessed, right? And not to say I'm being self-obsessed by grieving for my dad, I'm certainly not. But let's say, like the situation last night when I leave out the door and I'm feeling like, oh, my friends they don't want me around. I mean, whatever weird story I could tell myself about that. And then I'm like feeling sorry for myself. But then if I sit and say, like, Sarah, I notice you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're feeling really sad and isolated from your friends. And then when I move into, now I'm praying for all the beings everywhere who feel isolated and, unloved by their friends. It's like, now the focus isn't on me. It's like, oh my God, this is like a global phenomenon. We're all just human beings trying to get through life. And then I'm able to get enough distance from it that I can just then go to bed. I mean, I drove home, did not stop at the kitchen, went straight to bed, and it's a nice process, and I'm really grateful for it. And it reminds me of what Susan Pierce Thompson's been talking about. There's a lot of research on this idea that people who really kind of buy into their thoughts, the beliefs that are kind of coursing through their brain. I mean, we all have a million of them going on, but some people feel very identified to them, very close to them. And some people feel a little distant from them, and they tend to, I forget what she said, but they tend to just do better in life because they're not getting caught up in all these things. So her process is to talk to yourself in the third person. Sarah, I see that you are really upset about the fact that, gas prices are up and your paycheck just went down or whatever, that kind of thing. So that's helpful to keep ourselves from getting too caught up in the thinking.
Right. And the emotions of it. It's sort of like a bit like an undertow in an ocean. Like we're getting pulled out to sea, where we're gonna feel like we're drowning in this fear, this grief, whatever. Totally love that. Talk to us a little bit about how you got into shamanic work. I mean, in a way, I can imagine it's such a lovely transition from a medical doctor being a healer to just a different way of healing, I imagine.
Yeah, so I took a sabbatical in 2010 and it was just like I wasn't feeling engaged at work. So I just thought, well, I got to figure this out because I don't want to be a disengaged physician. Like that sounds terrible. So it probably is terrible. So anyway, that summer I spontaneously ended up spending a lot of time in the woods just because I had more time. I have 4 kids. My husband's a physician. I mean, we've both been working like so many hours for so long.
Wow.
And it was finally like the first time I had like an extended period of downtime to just wander and stumble about in the woods. And that summer, I remember like I sat in this marsh one day and these cowtails or cattails were like blowing in the wind. And I remember for a second, it was like something struck me as really odd. It seemed like those were blowing for me. Like there was like this communication going on between me and the cattails. And I was like, okay, like my scientific brain was like, okay, you're either going bananas, which was entirely possible. I have a lot of bipolar, creative, depressive, anxiety, all this in my family. Like, I guess we all probably do. But I had a pretty strong dose of it. So I was like, okay, I could have mania or something. Or there's something about this world that I do not understand. And there's something else here that's really kind of interesting. And that's really what I ended up saying, well, I don't know which one it is, but I'm just going to kind of keep going. And later that summer, I stumbled into the ancient idea that, the wild animals that cross our path have messages for us, which I mean, as a doctor, if you had told me that 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I'd have been like, yeah, I think that whoever just said that to you is like nuts or whatever. I just would completely disavow that because that wasn't what I believed at the time.
I know it sounds so narcissistic. Right. It just sounds like, of course, you have a message for me. Oh, the whole world revolves around me. And like it just seems wild to I know where this is going. So I just want to say that my brain would have that same reaction, like, oh, come on, as if I'm that important.
Well, yeah, that's such an interesting way to look at it too. And I was thinking more like animals aren't smarter than us. I mean, we all know that. Science shows that,
Right.
we're king of the mountain, the humans, right?
Yeah.
The and so anyway, but I was so desperate. I was so lost at sea and so confused. I was like, well, I'm just going to give it a try because I got no better ideas. And I remember just starting to play with the ideas. And the idea was just like, think of something that's bothering you and then sort of, or a problem that you have to solve, and then ask for an animal to show up and to solve the problem. And I remember at the time that summer, I was thinking I'd really like to write a book. I had this wild, these weird urges come to you out of the middle of nowhere when you're at midlife. And anyway, I was like, I don't know how to write a book, but how would I even, that's so confusing. But I was like, okay, if I'm supposed to write a book, how am I supposed to write a book? And that day I went on a walk and I was like waiting for some like giant hawk to like sail down and like, poke me in the eye or something. Something was going to happen that's going to be so dramatic. But of course, none of that happened. But the one thing that I did notice was the one thing that kind of drew my attention was on the way out of my neighborhood into the woods, I noticed this big ant hill where there are all these ants crossing the back and forth of the sidewalk and carrying little grains of something. And I was like, okay, if that's trying to show me how to write a book, I don't get it. But let me think about that for a minute. And as I contemplated, I was like, well, I mean, I guess ants make these massive castles and they're tiny little beings and they don't do it alone and they do it like really one tiny grain at a time. I mean, and I was like, okay, if I was going to be like an ant, I would like, so I opened up my computer and I named like a file, like the title of the book that I was thinking of writing. And I sort of just started doing that, like moving one little piece of grain of sand at a time. And then it went on from there because then I was like, okay, this is kind of helping me. That's weird. Let me see what else might help me. And so the more animals I noticed, and then I ended up starting a podcast with a friend because we were like, this is kind of cool and kind of fun. And we ended up, it was a call-in show. And I don't even know how people found us, Florence. It was bizarre because we were not advertising, right? But people would call into the show and tell us the wildest stories about how animals, these wild animals had showed up and given them this profound moment of grace, this profound instruction, we were all like crying, goosebumps. It was just like, I don't know what's happening, but this is crazy. Like animals can really, really help people. And so that's when I just was like, wow. And I was simultaneously training to be a coach with Martha Beck. And I remember thinking, this animal stuff is like sort of does the heavy lifting for people. It's like you don't even have to coach somebody, so to speak. You just create the space, introduce this idea, and people kind of can coach themselves through the animal encounters. And that was the basis for the beginning of a book, my first book that I wrote, which eventually became my sort of the book that I'm probably most known for, which is the book of Beasties, which is this kind of guide to working with the messages of animals. It's got all these like, many pages in it. We could do a divination. We could ask, what do the people who want to quit sugar, what beastie do they need? We could do that, right? Do you want to do that? Would that be fun?
I do want to do that. Yeah.
Okay, let's ask the beasties. Yeah, for all the people who are listening right now to this podcast and are longing to create, either to quit sugar or just to stay the course because they already have, what beastie do they need? Oh my goodness, this is funny because it's summer in Minnesota. Mosquito.
Oh goodness.
Interesting. Well, the themes are interdependence. So interdependence, meaning we depend upon each other, which that makes a lot of sense for me. Adaptability, transformation, and fertility. And I'll just read a couple lines. The mighty mosquito hums and swerves into your life to remind you of something extremely critical, the power of one. If you've ever been inside a tent or bedroom without a single mosquito, you know exactly how this diminutive beastie is what they are capable of. And at certain times, each one of us can get deluded or overwhelmed by life, convinced that some problems are too big or too complex or too long-standing to be changed. But Mosquito can cure you of such cynicism.
Wow.
Oh, that's so good. So it's talking about the idea of one effort, one bit of self-expression, one piece of art, one prayer, one gathering of like-minded hearts. Never underestimate your power to change the world or to change yourself. Wow. Well, anyway, this is the kind of thing, it's like that idea that there's something else. I don't know, it's within us, it's without us, but there's some other force that can support us. And I guess that's what I learned about through that initial endeavor into working with the animal spirits. And then, of course, I started doing drumming and learning about shamanic journeying, shamanic healing, these ancient ideas that essentially somebody can make this journey to the other worlds, the spirit worlds, and bring back healing or wisdom or information that can restore balance to a person or restore balance to a community. And got to experience that myself a few times. And I was just like, wow, I want to know more about this. I think this is what I felt was missing from traditional allopathic medicine. I'm a huge believer in traditional allopathic medicine, but I remember thinking, being a disease hunter, which was my job as a pathologist, to always search for disease, I was always like, what makes people well? And I think what I learned through my exploration of shamanism and spirit is that what makes people well is like singing, dancing, telling stories, spending time, as Gabrielle Roth says, in the sweet territory of your own silence. Those are the things that really make us more vital. And now that's really my focus now, is just encouraging others, and myself included, to express ourselves through our words, our paintings, our music, our dancing, whatever, our recipes we're making. Whatever it is, just being used, letting ourselves be used by the creative force.
Oh my gosh, incredible. So interesting. What a journey. Seems like so fun to just go with it. And okay, well, all right.
Yeah.
And your first, so how did you know that the mosquito represents that? Like, where did that information for your book come from?
Yeah. So when I started writing that book, well, for one thing, I did that podcast for a couple of years. So I got to know lots of these amazing stories. So some of those are woven in there. I've done a lot of travel and spent a lot of time with a lot of wild animal specialists. So I went to South Africa. I've been in Thailand, spent time with the elephants. I've spent time with people who study the bears. I've spent time, lots of people that I've spent time with through this fascination. And what I did is I opened a ceremony when I began writing that book, and I invited all the animal spirits that wanted to be part of the book to come and to share with me whatever they wanted to share. And then I had a crazy collection of some funny books and wild books that I've collected over the years. Some of them were like Victorian children's books about wild animals because they had the most amazing descriptions and words and things like that. And then also just like sources of, biology too, because I love, like, for example, there's like, let's see what it says for the mosquito for wellness. Oh yeah, like so there's a bunch of tips on the second page where they talk about specifics, but so for wellness, it says without water, mosquitoes' eggs cannot thrive. So begin a practice of gratitude for the water by placing sticky notes or other reminders that say thank you at your kitchen and bath faucets. And as you use these taps, silently say a grateful prayer to the water for nourishing you and giving you life. So I
Wow.
would take, like the biology, and then turn that into some message. So I just felt like, and every day I would, at the end of the writing day, I'd go, oh my gosh, I'm so amazed by what I got today. I'm scared tomorrow I'm going to wake up and not have or I'm going to run out of things. And it never happened. I mean, it's just amazing.
Wow.
So it was a really sacred process. And then at the end, I, closed the ceremony.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Sarah, what a story. That's just so wild. So tell us a bit about your book. So your first book, was it the autobiography?
So my very first book was this book called What the Walrus Knows, which was really like a brief, like I did a 1 page on each beastie. It was kind
Okay.
of me getting warmed up. It's like how to align with the energy of mosquito, chameleon, whatever it was. If you saw it, then it's hinting that you tried this new energetic approach. Then I wrote this book called Born to Freak, a salty primer for irrepressible humans. And this came out of, I got diagnosed during my sabbatical, I got diagnosed with ADHD as an adult. So I was 42 when I got diagnosed. And that just opened a whole door. I mean, I'm not a lover of labels, but I loved it, helped me understand so much about myself. And so this is kind of a love letter and some crazy stories that don't make me look so good. Some funny stories about being born to freak. And so this idea that whether you have ADHD, depression, anxiety, Asperger's, like you're here to
Neurodivergent.
neurodivergent. You're here to restore balance to the world, by sharing who you are. And then I wrote my memoir, which is Swimming with Elephants. And that was really, I think I was far enough along to understand my journey from leaving medicine to become, to do the spiritual work that I do now and stuff. So that came, and then we had the day. This came out of 100-day project, which I'm a huge fan of those projects. This is called How Good Are You Willing to Let It Get? And it's really like a daily, like a reader. So I really benefit from taking time in the morning to read inspirational stuff. And I was like, I love that format. So I shared a lot of shamanic stories and spirit stories in here. And I collaborated with Alice the elephant, who is my spirit beastie and helper friend. So that's what came from that. And they've all, and so like I wanted, 100-day projects are just a wonderful way to I also believe that being creative, and that's what 100-day projects are for, is really kind of part of the antidote to addiction. Addiction, the community, and being creative. I think those two things can really, really help because they give us an outlet for all the feelings. They give us a place to go with all that stuff, So 100-day project, if you're not aware of it and you're listening, you can go to you can Google 100dayproject.org and you can learn all sorts of things about them. But I usually lead a group once a year, and you basically pick some project you design yourself and you spend 15 minutes a day doing it, and that's it, no more than that. And then at the end of 100 days, you will have this amazing body of work and you'll know a lot more about yourself. And it sounds quite simple, but it's actually quite complex. And we usually do some parts work. I usually have somebody come in and do some parts work with the group because all kinds of parts of yourself will come up, fear of sharing your work, fear it's not good enough, fear you're doing something stupid. I mean, all these things, will bubble up. But then, wow, what happens to people and how much we all grow. It's just phenomenal.
Oh, so cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your sugar story, your shamanic story. They're so interesting. Is there anything else you would like to add before we wrap up today that you think might be helpful to those that are listening that are, either, as you said, already sugar-free and are just trying to stay that way and hang on to what they've got, or trying to catch up?
I would say I like the idea of staying close to the mothership. So whatever that means, like reading supportive books, talking to people who are trying to do the same thing you're trying to do. reading, following people, like cleaning up your social media so you're only following people that are really speaking positively about the changes you're trying to make. Like all those things will really help you and reinforce you in your desire to go that direction. And that it takes what it takes. You know, many of us go in and out of the ditch for a long time until we, like you said, something convergence occurs and something magical happens, and there we are, and we're clearer.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Something we start to stick our lands. Or is that, I'm thinking about the gymnasts in the Olympics.
Yeah.
Oh, but can they land it? Can it stick?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. There's just one more thing I was going to ask you. Just give me a second for my brain to bring it back up. I know. You have a doctor husband. You are a fourth generation physician. You lived in the labs. You're all about science. Was there a bit of a journey in getting over the fear that you'd be criticized by the science world that you grew up in and live in?
Oh, yeah. I remember fantasizing or joking to somebody when I was on my sabbatical and I was going to ask for more time off because I was kind of thinking, I can't, 3 months isn't enough. So I wanted to extend it to 6 months. And I fantasized about calling them, being like, hey guys, I'm getting all these really cool messages from wild animals. And so like, I just can't come back just now. I'm wondering if I can, if you could live without me for another 3 months, But the truth is I never would have said that to them because I would just been so horrified. Um,
Totally.
I did publish a book like 6 months after I stopped that sabbatical, or it was somewhere. I mean, I did come out with the book, but it definitely, I felt a lot of safety with certain groups. So I wouldn't have outed myself directly to any of the guys, my practice partners, probably that year, or even maybe 2 years afterwards. But now I'm completely open about it. But I had a
Really?
lot, yeah. Oh, now it's like my life. I mean, sometimes I forget how weird I am, but like, how it is. Um, I think I felt a lot of safety. Was part of a coach training. So I made a lot of friends really fast that were very supportive and loving. I had an editor that was very supportive and loving. And I just, my friends and family supported me too. Like I shared what was going on with me. I remember one night I had one friend who's a very high power attorney in a power company, and another one's a cardiologist, another one who's like a brilliant interior designer who runs this very successful business, and telling them about this animal stuff. And I thought, oh God, they're going to get upset or they're going to think I'm flaky. And that night, like they all way got into it. And then some crazy things happened. Like one friend, I was like, yeah, we were describing this owl because she's like, I think I might be an owl. And then I remember we were reading that owls, like they have one ear lower than the other. That's like one of their physical characteristics. And she lifted up her hair. And for the first time, none of us had ever seen this, but she has one ear that's dramatically lower than her other one. And we all just went, okay. Like, I mean, with stuff like that just happened over and over again that I felt very supported, I think. So
That's amazing.
yeah.
That's amazing. That is so cool. See, yeah, and then and people like you allow the rest of us to lighten up and just relax. Have fun with this. Roll with it. What's the harm? What's the harm in thinking you know what? I could tell you, Sarah, I can tell you a true story. Oh my gosh. I was thinking, I don't have any stories. I do have a story. My father was a sailor between the ages of 10 and 15. I grew up on a boat and we sailed around the world. He retired early. And so I was not on the boat at this time. This is a story from my father. And and I forget where it was. We were on the boat on and off he stayed on the boat for 30 years. I was on the boat between the ages of 10 and 15. And my mom at that point, I have two younger sisters. My mom, when I was about 15, just turning 16, said to her, my dad, her husband, honey, I have never seen you happier. This is your thing. This is your thing. And we've got 3 young girls that I'm homeschooling, and I don't think I'm doing a great job. They flop overboard and they swim to shore. They make friends with who knows who. They take off all day. And, eventually maybe they make it back for dinner. And, I'm worried they're going to turn out really weird. I think they're going to be weird. I think I'm going to go back to Canada, let them finish their education. We'll come back and forth and we'll visit. And, they were going to try and figure that piece out. And that was the plan. So my father carried on, and this is one of his stories. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, he was off of South Africa, and his boat was there was these ambush of dolphins or porpoises, whichever, and they kept sort of, there was a whole bunch of them. They were out of Disney World or SeaWorld, right? Like they were flying into the air right up against the bow of the boat. And he was like, what are they doing? They're going to hit the boat. And he was at the front. He was looking at them, and they were growing in numbers, and they were just like flying into the air towards the bow of the boat. And he was like, they're going to hit the bow of the boat. Anyways, eventually he thought, well, must have been intuitive. He's no longer alive. I'd love to ask him some details around this, but eventually something occurred to him. I think I'm going to move the boat more to the right. So he adjusted the rudder, the sails, right? Like he adjusted the boat. So, he started to go away from where these dolphins just kept sort of rising up into the ocean and sort of almost cramming into the front of the boat. Turns out there was coral reefs, and he would have lost his life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is what I'm talking about, Florence.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop. It's just amazing. Okay, you're like so fascinating. You got to write a book, woman. Who doesn't want to read about a child who was practically raised at sea? I mean, that sounds like a wonderful book. But anyway, I do digress.
I think I should be part of your freak book. Definitely. Definitely.
Sure.
But it was such a moving story. And he realized later that those oceans were known, and those dolphins were known. It wasn't just them. They were known to do that. They were known to save sailors. Yeah. So incredible. So incredible. Yeah. Sarah, sorry, was I getting you off?
No, it's good. Just thank you for sharing that. It's a beautiful story.
Yes, and thank you for sharing your story. Let me last question. Tell us about the transformation that you experienced in body, mind, and spirit, pre-sugar and post being a whole food woman, right? When you were in the junk, and what your life was like now, just to kind of bring that home.
Yeah. It's like there's this peace and calm. Like all my energy now is fueled towards, what creative stuff I want to do, or conversations I'm going to have with my collaborator in my business. Before then, when I was in the food, it's just like my brain is constantly consumed with, what did you eat for this, and what are you having for dinner? Like this constant battle that was going on, and I didn't really realize it until you get out of it, and then you just feel really calm. I'm still aware of the fact that part of me that wants to overeat is still there. Like I'll finish my breakfast, and there'll still be a part of me that will just be like, oh, I would love to have 3 more eggs and some cheese on it, whatever. But I'm just like, but lunch is coming, and that's in a few hours. We'll be all right. And then I go back to, living my life. But I think it's just that peace and calm around that one element, because life has got so much already stirring me up anyway. It's such a relief not to have that on top of all the other stuff. And again, confidence, like, I have been putting myself out there in so many ways that I guess I feel like that has to do with that too. Like I trust myself, and it's all good. Like lately I've been making a lot of art, and people are like, how are you doing that? Why are you putting it out for sale, and you're just expecting that people will buy it? And I'm just like, well, I don't know if they're going to buy it or not, but I'm certainly just going to put it out there, and I'm just having a blast doing it. And I love it. It's mostly the peace. I guess that's the thing, but that's the only thing most of us want in the first place. I mean, everybody I coach, everybody wants to be on a beach or retire because they think that's going to bring them peace. And it might for a while, but usually your thinking will come back, or whatever, the troubles will come back, whatever they are. There'll be trouble on the island, on the tropical island. So I guess that's the main ingredient. I need to make a list about that, though. I've seen some really fun lists where people have generated all the things that have changed. I think that's powerful to look at that. And just the joy of getting dressed, going, oh my gosh, like I love and appreciate my body. It is not perfect. It's not about the number on the scale. It's just about, I feel good. I know it's being fueled. Exactly. I'm doing everything I can to make my body as good as and healthy as it can be right now.
Mm.
And I'm human. So, I mean, I'm of the nature, as Thich Nhat Hanh says, to grow old and get diseased and die one day. But right now I'm doing everything I can to take care of myself and my body. I feel that appreciation back for my body. Like there's a contentment there and a peace there that was not there when I was in the food.
Oh, Sarah, thank you so much for your time today. What a pleasure to meet you and share you.
Such a joy. Thank you, Florence.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for tuning in this week. If you would like more interviews, more information, and more inspiration on how to break up with sugar, go to my YouTube channel, Kick Sugar Coach, or my website, kicksugarcoach.com. See you next week.